Noble and I'm the Human Resources Manager here at Gary Nash & Co. And I'm delighted to very warmly welcome you all here tonight. Now it's Gary's role to give you a formal welcome, so I don't want to steal any of his thunder. So our last planned event was meant to occur in 2021, where we planned to celebrate 40 years in business. But unfortunately, COVID got in the way of that. So it's really lovely to be able to stage an event to show our appreciation for our clients and also valued contractors and business people who assist us and help us to assist our clients in providing a seamless property service. So just a little bit of housekeeping. You've all got a booklet on your table, and on the second page of that booklet you'll notice the program. We're going to do our best to keep to time, but they are just a rough guide for times. We hope to have everything wrapped up around 8:30 this evening. You do have a pen, so if you'd like to make any notes, there's a blank page on the back page. We are really looking forward to hearing from some excellent speakers this evening. We have Steve Contessa from the CFA and also Jacob Kane from the REIV, along with some of our team members who are going to give you an update on property management. So, food on the tables. Please make sure that you pass the food around and help yourself. So 4 of the options are gluten-free. So the options that aren't gluten-free, for those who need to know that, are the chicken bites and the vegetable falafels. They're not gluten-free, but everything else is. So please, hopefully everyone has a drink, but if you need to get another drink, please feel free to go up to the bar throughout the evening. There are bathroom facilities in the hallway. And now I'm really delighted to welcome Gary Nash to the stage. Mike and I have been part of the Gary Nash & Co family since Mike joined the business back in 2010. And then Cameron and Christy next joined the business when Cam joined us in 2013. And it's been such a privilege to work with Gary and Marion and to learn with them and to have the benefit of all their years of experience. So I'm sure I speak on behalf of all of the team members, present and past, in saying how proud we are to work with them and what a privilege it is. We are always striving to improve our service and appreciate the faith that you have shown in us with your properties. So thank you, and I hope you have a lovely evening.
Wow, okay. So first of all, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're gathered here and pay my respects to their elders, both past and present. So thanks, Sarah, for that introduction, and I think it's ditto from Marion and I that we're very privileged to have you guys and a great team to work with going forward. So just a few words that as a progressive business right from day one, we've always attempted to be proactive and on the job. And when I say on the job, to give you, our valued clients, cutting edge information to make those informed decisions when we look after your assets. And as I reflect back on perhaps a decade or two ago, that in my opinion, some of the things haven't changed much. There's been some great improvements, but some of the things that we work with are pretty much continuous all the time. And when we work through to try and get those edges and improvements for you as investors, or as we call you now, rental providers, previous landlords, we worked with the peak body in Victoria and have since our inception with the Real Estate Institute of Victoria. As a progressive body, we put in rationale arguments, what's the benefit for you as rental providers, investors, to try and get a really good balanced outcome. I can assure you, not always do we get that, but we do have great representation for you there. And if we have a look back in perhaps 1986, some of you may not have even been about then, but you can see that the Institute's aims has held an objective since 1936, and that was a 50-year anniversary. The next slide there is what we're talking about tonight: landlords' fight to free the grip of unjust laws. Perhaps a little bit, you mightn't get away with that terminology in this day and age, but that's the things that where we worked and trying to represent you going forward. The next slide. Investors rock against the tides of the economy. And you'll hear from our President, Jake Kane, tonight, how that is impacting our society in Victoria. And things that have changed, which you also hear from some of our team speakers and leaders, how the speed of computer is providing additional services. So that was back in 1986, and we have progressed a lot with that technology going forward. So here we are in July 2024, working through and resolving very similar issues. And so tonight, from our team, you'll hear from Steve Contessa in a moment. You'll hear from Jake Kane, our current REIV President. You'll hear from fellow Director Mike Noble. You'll hear from Cameron Meggs. You'll hear from really good team leaders and senior people in our property management of how we're striving to get things moving forward there. So I hope, as Sarah said, you have an informative night. Part of that will be looking for a bit of feedback from you and asking questions of what might be on your mind as we go through there. There'll be plenty of time for questions, and we do hope you get some great value out of it. Also, I'd like to thank, before I hand over and introduce Steve, thank Sarah and the team for coordinating all the back end of this, an outstanding effort and a really great job we've done there, or she's done there for us there. So, without any further ado, I'll just read you through a bit of a bio on Steve, and that's pretty much in your front document there. So Steve Contessa began his career with fire services in 2003. Over the past 21 years, Steve worked at fire stations across regional cities in Geelong and Ballarat and various locations around Metropolitan and the CBD. Prior to this current role, Steve worked as a commander in the Operational Training Directorate, overseeing the training and development of more than 300 new firefighters for the state of Victoria. In 2021, Steve and his family moved up here to the rural city of Wangaratta, and he now leads the operational commanders and administrative staff who work and support 4,900 CFA volunteers across 56 brigades in District 23. I'm pleased to say that Steve is occasionally my boss. But I can assure you the information that Steve will pass on to you tonight of some of the challenges that we face in keeping your assets safe. It's not synonymous. You really need to take note of what Steve will pass on to you in knowledge, keeping in compliance, and also making sure that your asset is right up to speed to be looked after for you. So if you'd like to give a very warm welcome to Steve, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Really appreciate the introduction and, importantly, the opportunity to come and speak here tonight. It's a privilege for me to come and represent Victorian Fire Services and deliver some really important key messages to yourselves, not only as residents in the community, but there's some really important points that you'll be able to take away tonight for yourselves, for your families, and importantly for your properties and investments. The key messages tonight, we're going to focus on sharing some knowledge around home fire safety and the risks that come with house fires. In the presentation that I'm about to give, I'm going to explain some high risk factors that show some real over-representation in key community groups within our communities where fire is unproportionately a significant risk for those people. We'll take a look at some emerging risks that have made their way into our lives with the risks of lithium-ion batteries and what they can present in challenges in your homes and the damages that they can cause when things aren't going right. The presentation I'm about to deliver is a snapshot of a really comprehensive presentation that takes several hours to work through. So I'd ask that there's a little bit of forgiveness in dropping back the amount of slides. I don't want it to be too onerous, but there's some key messages there. Please feel free to ask any questions at the end of the presentation if there's something you're not all that sure about or if I haven't explained it correctly. From experience, and I can speak for hours on the importance of having functioning smoke alarms in your homes. Some of the emerging risks that the fire service are dealing with are very challenging for fire brigades to respond to and for people to live with in their lives due to the challenges that they present. What we're going to look at tonight is about preventable fires. Most of the fires that we do see in people's lives that destroy lives, destroy homes and families are preventable, and the statistics that we're going to look at tonight will be able to show you that. Over the next 10 or 15 minutes, the presentation is also going to show 3 short video clips which are either animations or simulated fire conditions which demonstrate the importance of having properly working smoke alarms in your homes. As a bit of a trigger warning, if you're not comfortable with viewing these, please feel free to step aside around in the foyer, and I'm sure that one of Gary Nash's team will be able to be with you out there. As I work through the presentation, there's going to be some impelling and compelling key messages that come up. House fires regularly and all that too commonly reach temperatures of more than 800 degrees Celsius. Now, I'm sure you can appreciate that that's not a situation that's compatible with human life. That's why we see so many fatalities. The vast majority of fires in homes originate in the bedroom or in the living area. And in that representation, it's over 70% of fatal fires start in the bedroom or living area of the home. The number 3,000 represents the average number of house fires that we see in Victoria every year, and that's a significant number. And 18 represents the number of people on average that die every year due to house fires. And it's all something that initiatives like this, where we get to speak to community, deliver on important community messages, that we hope to reduce some of those important numbers down to zero. When we look at the people who are at high risk of fires in their homes, there are some really disproportionate statistics here. And the number one highest risk for people is those people that live with a disability. Also highly represented, and it's unfortunate that there's a similar number there for people over 65 years of age are disproportionately represented. People that live alone in their homes and children aged 0 to 4. These statistics come from a study that ran from 2003 to 2017 that looked into preventable fires across all of Australia, and these results are drawn from a number of 900 fatalities over that period of time. It's important to note as well that people who have multiple risk factors, those that may be living with disability and also aged over 65, that risk multiplies significantly. There's also some other factors that may increase the risk, and that's being affected by some medications, smoking, the consumption of legal or illegal drugs, and people that live in a low socioeconomic status. Most fires start in kitchens. That's an undeniable fact. There's some reasons that go into that. And the most common cause of kitchen fires fires is due to unattended cooking. 5 p.m. is the peak time that 000 receive calls for house fire responses. Faulty appliances in the kitchen are also a leading factor, and excess clutter and the build-up of grease is also a common cause. Most fatal house fires that obviously result in the death of a person or persons, start in the bedroom or living areas. Approximately 2/3 of our fatal fires occur between the hours of 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. when people are sleeping. We can look at ways of reducing that risk as we go through this presentation. So here's one of the first little demonstrations. Now, I'm obviously putting it out there that this is in a controlled environment. You'll see somebody attempting to extinguish a fire that's a pot on the stove with burning oil by pouring water onto that and the problem that can cause. Strongly recommend that this is not a party trick, and I don't want you going home and showing anyone what you've learnt tonight. But there's a little clip that'll play a couple of times through, but I think you'll see the risk that it does present, and importantly to the people who are attempting to extinguish a fire, the actual injuries that are expected. So that's 1 cup of water being poured into a pot that you saw on the stove, and that'll play through a couple of times. But you can imagine there, instantly that flash of burning oil and water would cause significant injury to people. It would also cause the fire to go up through the range hood or the ventilation into the cabinetry of the kitchen, and most likely into the ceiling space, which makes it very difficult for fires to be contained to that room of origin. It's something that oncoming appliances or fire trucks who respond to these emergencies are faced with, all too common when people try and extinguish pots on the stove with a vessel of water. In my recommendation, CFA advises that we keep fire blankets available within reach of cooking areas and or fire extinguishers for that exact reason. So, as part of an understanding of people who are investing or for your own properties, I would strongly recommend purchasing a fire blanket and keeping it somewhere within close reach of the stove. 72% of fatal fires, as I mentioned before, start in the living areas or bedrooms where people are sleeping. Most commonly caused, there's 6 most common causes for these types of fires, and we can see here some pictures that show that, and it's heaters or open fires, and the risk that it comes with drying clothes that may be sitting in front of a heater. Overloaded electrical boards. We can see there's a picture of a power board that's got adapters put in there, and it's well and truly overloaded. That obviously puts a lot of draw of electricity through that and creates a risk. We see that all too commonly. The picture on the far right hand side is a faulty appliance. And this is where we start looking at some of the more emerging risks. So the device charging is one of the most common causes that we see at the moment. Devices that I think if we were all to think about how many of these we have in our homes, if you live in a family of 4 or 5 people, I'd suggest you probably have upwards of almost 50 devices in your room, in your house, that you would be charging. So your mobile phones, your laptops, your watches, bikes and scooters, anything that has a rechargeable battery presents a significant risk. And there's no, I suppose, pun intended here, but the device that we're seeing is sitting on what would be a bed sheet, or that's one of the recommendations we make, is that any charging of devices takes place on a hard, non-combustible surface, so whether that's the vinyl floor or a bench top, something that if it was to overheat and start a fire, it's got very minimal chance of extending beyond that. The other key message that we have with batteries, and it'll be covered off in a couple of slides as well, is about the importance of making sure that they're in properly working order. We have seen some house fires in and around the Wangaratta area over recent years where the cause has been determined to be a faulty device that's been charged, and people have made comment that they were going to have it replaced, or that in the next week I was going to buy a new one of those, or the like. So it's all too common that a faulty device is the cause of a fire. a properly fitted or a properly associated device charging to make sure that we haven't got a risk there of a device that potentially may not meet Australian standards. Unattended candles, that's a big risk for us where we see historically candles have been around forever. We do go to fires where they blow over or they fall over. They might blow in the wind against the curtain or something like that. They are a really common cause of house fires. And I'm sure you've all heard the risk of what electric blankets present and the importance of maintaining them and replacing them if they do become damaged. This is where we start to look at the occurrence of fires around lithium-ion batteries and how I suppose, escalated they've been over the last couple of years in particular. So the photo on the left shows an e-scooter that has caught fire whilst it's being charged. And the two photos on the right are the same fire where a motorised car, a remote control car caught fire whilst it was being charged. And you can see the two photos on the right really show the clutter around that device as it was being charged. And the risk with lithium-ion batteries, you may have seen them on the news, is that when they do become faulty and they go into a thermal runaway, they short circuit and become overheated. The flame that's generated is almost jet-like. It's like fireworks. It's really heat intensive. A lithium-ion battery can't be extinguished all that easy, and it takes a significant amount of effort to cool that down. So when they do catch fire and when they are in contact with other combustible materials, that fire happens very, very quickly, and it develops to a point where it's often not to the point of being able to be extinguished. One of the recommendations that we're making around the charging of e-bikes, e-scooters, is that they're not charged inside if it can be avoided. So we recommend charging them outside so that if they did have an event where they caught fire, that the likelihood of you burning your house down is much less. So strongly recommending charging devices on solid, flat, non-combustible material, a benchtop, not within reach of anything that could burn, but also going home and having a look at what's in your house and where we've maybe become a little bit complacent to that technology in our lives. I'm going to show you a short video now where it's got some, it's an animation. It's got some voiceover of a person sleeping in their room, and the voiceover describes the risk of smoke in a house fire and the importance of having a smoke alarm. So I'll step to the side while this plays and just allow the audio to do the work on this one.
You are at highest risk from fire when you are sleeping. Many people think they will wake up when there is a fire, but they are wrong. Most people who die in fires are found on or next to their bed. During sleep, you lose your sense of smell, so smoke won't wake you up. Carbon monoxide in the smoke, also known as the silent killer, will put you into a deeper sleep. Smoke will kill you before the flames do. Some people think the smoke alarm outside their bedroom is enough to alert them to fire. Research has shown that if a fire starts in a bedroom and the door is closed, the smoke alarm outside the bedroom will not activate until the fire burns through the door. By then, the bedroom will be full of smoke and it will be too late. Smoke may not wake you, but a working smoke alarm in your bedroom will. The number and location of smoke alarms is more important than the type of smoke alarms you have. You are required by law to have smoke alarms between each sleeping area and the rest of the house. This is why you will often find them in a hallway or a main room of a house. Smoke alarms are also required on every level of the house and in escape paths, such as stairways. Early warning could save your life. Victorian Fire Services recommend that you also have smoke alarms in lounge or living areas and areas where people sleep, such as bedrooms. You might even consider putting one in the garage. For the best protection, having interconnected smoke alarms means that when one activates, they all will. Smoke alarms are not needed in kitchens, laundries or bathrooms. In these areas, they are likely to cause false alarms. Only working smoke alarms in the right locations save lives.
So we see trends throughout the year. Winter is often the peak season for home fires due to the requirement for heating. Most people are staying home and they've got a lot of activity around the house, drying clothes in front of the heater, like I mentioned before. One of the biggest changes to our homes and our living environments is the introduction over recent years of synthetic fibres, the building materials and construction methods that go into our houses. The risk that a modern home presents now compared to a house that was built and furnished in the 1950s or so is really quite alarming. And the next little video that I'm going to show you is a presentation that depicts a simulation. The video that you'll see on the left is a modern home that's furnished with modern furnishings with synthetic fibres, the likes of particle boards in the furniture, all of the stuff that we see now in our homes. And the image on the right-hand side, or the video on the right, is of a home that was constructed with furnishings and bedding and the like of a home from the 1950s. As you watch this, I want you to really obviously take note of the timings that's occurring at the top of the screen and seeing how quickly a fire that starts in your bedroom will take hold. And I want you, as you watch this, to think back a couple of slides to the risks that the lithium batteries present to maybe a mobile phone sitting on a bed charging, or on a desktop surrounded by papers or the like. But they're risks that we didn't have 50 years ago, but they're there now. We need to be aware of it. So as that timestamp will just work through, these are simulated bedrooms, like I said, and this is the fire's been lit with just what would be simulating a cigarette or something that's been left on the bed. So that's not a fire that would be conducive to a battery fire. It's very much of a natural fire. So the furnishings on the right are your cottons, your natural fibres, and your furnishings on the left are synthetic and often manufactured materials. You can see the video on the left is obviously the fire's getting bigger, but it's also starting to produce some black smoke, and it's that smoke that by now, that smoke alarm would have already operated if it was in the bedroom. So we're under 50 seconds at this point in time, and I would suggest that the smoke that was in the room on the left, you wouldn't survive more than 5 or 6 seconds before you took a breath and became unconscious. So there's no editing going on with the camera here or with the footage. It is as black as what that's presenting from the polymers and the plastics and the vinyls that are in that type of material. And you can see the difference in fire with what's on the right-hand side with the natural fibres. So we're less than 1:20. You most likely wouldn't even notice that fire was happening on the right-hand side, but that room on the left is already at a point where you wouldn't survive being in that room. As this plays out closer to the 2-minute mark, you may be in the garden, you may be outside in another room, you may be watching TV, and none the wiser that a bedroom fire of that size is developing at that rate. You can see the fire comparable on the right to the natural fibres. So if somebody was in that room, that smoke layer would be acrid, thick black smoke above your head height. You wouldn't be able to stand up in that room. And the heat in there would also be getting upwards in the several hundred degrees. And you can start to see now, as we just tick past the 2-minute mark, that fire would be a fatal bedroom fire. Now what happens at this point here is that basically everything in the room reaches a temperature where it just combusts. it reaches a flash point where it doesn't even need to be in touch with the flames. Everything in that room automatically becomes involved in fire. The plastics and the polymers, as they're heated up, they release gases, and those gases ignite. So that room at 2.5 minutes is completely non-survivable. The video on the right is at more than 30 minutes, so that's not even the 2-minute mark. So that's at a point where that white smoke, if needed, you could walk past that smoke, you'd obviously smell it, but it wouldn't be a fatal breath of smoke where the other one would absolutely. So that goes to show that the fire brigade response to house fires 50 years ago, when we were working with those types of materials in our lives, you had 30 minutes to be able to get to a house, perform firefighting activities, and most likely stop the fire from going beyond the room of origin. But the fire on the left in the modern room there would be almost impossible to reach in an amount of time for the fire brigade to do any sort of effective work. The key message here is the importance of smoke alarms, because we know in a modern home that we've just seen there, 2 minutes is not a long time to be able to get out. But it's definitely going to be unachievable for the fire brigade to be alerted in that time, be triggered by 000 Victoria, and then travel to your house and extinguish the fire. So the importance of smoke alarms in your home can't be underestimated. Knowing what we've learned with the smoke alarms that are in hallways, if that door's closed, the fire will be to a point that we've seen there before it activates a working smoke alarm. The final message is about being able to escape these fires if you were in a house that was involved. We all know there's shutters and the light, the aluminium shutters that are on our windows. We like to think that a good level of planning would be to have 2 escape routes from any room in your home. So whether that's a doorway, whether that's a bedroom window, you need to be able to get out if there was a fire. Obviously we have security shutters for security, sometimes they're for aesthetic reasons, but my key message here is if the fire brigade need to access a house to perform a rescue, to get one of the loved ones out, they do present a time challenge to us. We can get through them, but they're definitely a barrier. But more importantly, they're a barrier to yourselves if you have these on your house to be able to get out if you need to. The important part of this message is that understand how to operate them in the dark. If your power is to go out and they're electric, can you still escape the house? So really important message. And finally, before I wrap things up, I'm open to some questions or to some comments, but we do have some links here that I'm sure we can pass on to Gary Nish & Co for anyone who wanted some further information for us to be able to provide that to you. So I think there's some real key takeaways here, and it's a really important message for me in representing the fire services. Hopefully you've taken something away from that, because it is so important in our mission to be able to protect lives and property, but also to know that you're doing the right things to understand those risks for yourselves and your family. So thank you for the opportunity to speak. Hopefully that's not too heavy and overbearing for a great night that this will be, and I'll be around for the night for anyone who wanted to ask any questions or make any comments. Thank you, Gary.
Thanks very much, Steve. Any quick questions before Steve pops off the stage? I can assure you my training with CFA is certainly, we've seen the evolution of the modern, I suppose, furniture and the impact that has, and I think that video up there gives you a very clear indication of how important it is that when you go to buy furnishings, etc., you really should ask a lot of questions of what's this fabric, what's this made of, what's the impact of fire, because I can assure you the toxicity that comes out of those the products of today is it will just kill you as quick as anything. But anyway, thank you, Steve, and thanks very much. Okay, we'll now hear from our residential PM team, led by Erin and Kylie, who'll give you a bit of a run on some of the innovations that we're working with, some of the challenges that they're going through, and hopefully that'll cultivate a few questions, and then after that we've got another keynote to come through. So across to you, Erin.
Thanks, Gary. As discussed, Kylie and I are just going to give you a brief sort of snapshot on what's been happening in the residential property management department. Just to start with leasing, for the 23-24 financial year, we've had 253 groups that have viewed properties as opposed to 700 for the previous year. We put this decline down to more efficient processes with our leasing. We've introduced the use of Ignite, which is a realestate.com program. This has allowed us to conduct fewer open for inspections and find quality renters for you in a shorter time frame. We're also leasing a high number of properties off market without advertising, so we might only be conducting one inspection with pre-qualified renters for those properties. The number of properties leased is down 21% on last year, dropping to 89 from 112. We're finding that renters are getting into their homes and staying in for the second or third lease, as opposed to the COVID years where we saw a much higher turnover and a low movement. We are now seeing long-term renters, which leads to less wear and tear on your properties. We've also taken into consideration that this drop and decline may be coming down to the affordability of properties in the Wangaratta market. Mike Noble, Sky Couch, our leasing manager, who couldn't be here tonight, and myself recently attended the Affordable Housing Strategy meeting that was run by the local council. And a couple of interesting stats that we took away from that were that households where rent is more than 30%, in 2011 was at 7.2%, and then in 2021 that was at 30%. June 2003, 96% of all rentals in Wangaratta were classed as affordable, and in June 2023, only 28% of rentals in Wangaratta were classed as affordable, and that's using a 30% threshold with affordability. So the other thing I just wanted to touch on was just a new program that we're using for our ingoings and vacates. So we know a few of you might have seen we've got a 360-degree camera, which I'm just going to step down here. I'm going to tell you without breaking this. Alright. Just a second, sorry. So we use a 360-degree camera at every ingoing and vacate for your property. So we've really found that this has decreased the amount of VCAT cases that we've had. I think we've had one lodged in the last 12 months, which is a pretty dramatic decrease. And as you can see here, so over here is the ingoing, which was done on the 4th of January 2023, and then the vacate report was done on the 11th of January 2024. And it just gives you a full 360-degree walkthrough of the property, which you can see if there's any changes, as you'll see when we go into the bathroom. Sorry, just put that down. You can see if you can scroll in, there's quite a bit of mold and mildew in the grout there, and on this side over here there's none, so that was a really easy negotiation to have with the renter to come back and do some cleaning, whereas previously we're going on standstill photos. And also here as you fly around, you can see that the towel rail is missing. And so again, that was a really easy process to get that replaced, whereas back a few years ago that would be a bit of a process and a bit backwards and forwards to get those items rectified for you. So we're finding we're getting a lot cleaner, less damaged properties at vacate due to the program. Excellent. I'll hand over to Kylie.
The program's actually been really good for me with maintenance as well, being able to look at properties properties, so we've got something in and going, I'm not really sure if it's something that I need to attend to, I can easily go to that rather than spending half an hour going out to the properties. It just makes things a lot more efficient. I'd just like to talk about minimum standards and safety checks, which were a big issue that we spoke about as they were being rolled out in 2021. I'm really happy to say that now all of our properties have had at least one lot of those safety checks completed, getting up to 2 and 3 with the smoke alarms. And at first we did see a number of properties that required repairs. As we work through the system, that's all dropping off really significantly. It's a lot easier. Reports have been great to read and easy for me to interpret. We've seen some changes recently to the electrical regulations, which has been a bit challenging for me to understand, but luckily we've got great contractors that are helping me through that. It's meant that some of our little things like safety switches are now non-compliant. I'm hoping I'm saying this right. And that we're changing them to a different type of safety switch, so those are something that most properties are seeing that we'll have to do. With the minimum standards, which we had quite a list of them that were in the original booklet, our property managers, both Michelle and Erin, know what to look for. We're going out, and as we go through the properties, we're checking all of those. The things that, most of the things that we've had to change for those have been small, maybe changeover of a lock from a deadlock to one that can be opened with a latch. Some windows have had to have latches installed. A small number of properties have needed blinds fitted to lounge room windows or bedroom windows. I've got some fabulous numbers. Our safety checks in 2023 to 2024, we performed 548 checks. Some of those were combined smoke alarms and electric, so that's why the numbers are a little bit different. Next year, I've got 583 checks scheduled to be done. So they're pretty even numbers. Trying to spread the checks out so that it spreads out your expenses, so we don't have a big lump one year and then nothing the next year. If I can split it instead of doing it all at once. Modifications was something else that we were a little bit concerned about with the new Act coming in, but in practice we actually haven't seen many requests for modifications. We've had mostly just picture hooks. A couple of people have wanted to paint some walls. Most of them have been white, no one's wanted red, no one's wanted black. We've installed some safety rails for people, some security cameras. That's all been at the renter's expense, and it's something that they will return the property to the way it was when they leave. We do know that there's some new regulations in the pipeline, that there's been a little bit of news about that. It's really difficult to comment at this stage on how it will impact us. We just don't have enough detail. Looking at some of them, I think the things we already do, blind cords is something that we're already aware of. We're making sure the properties are safe. Shower heads, they're talking about having efficient shower heads, which are things we already do. Heaters, hot water services, air conditioners have been something else they've mentioned that need to be replaced with an energy efficient unit. Again, that's something we do as it comes to the end of its life. We're certainly not, and none of our contractors put in a unit that's not energy efficient. The question marks that I have are around what will look like with the insulation and draft proofing. Again, that's something, unfortunately, we just don't have the detail of. Where I've started to just take note of which properties have ceiling insulation, just in case we need to know. Again, my safety check reports have been excellent. The electricians take photos of the ceilings for me so I can see. It's really good. I don't have to climb up. We've been talking about technology. Gary was talking about computers in 1986. We've introduced a new app for our renters to use, which is called the Release app. So they can see their lease, they can see if they've paid their rent, but they can also report any maintenance through the app. So they can send me a photograph of, let's say, a leaking tap, which is ridiculous, but maybe a crack in a wall or something like that. And then I can look back on the reports and see if it's something that's already been there, but they can also give me some detail. It means that I'm not spending a lot of time dealing with people coming in or talking on the phone to people when maybe I don't need to, which again, it just gives us efficiencies, mean that we can give you better services, we're not wasting time on other things. So the maintenance numbers for the financial year just been, 2023 to 2024, we had 2,248 maintenance tasks performed, which is a lot. Just means that sometimes it's good that our renters do report maintenance. We want to keep the properties in good condition. It means that if I don't get to something straight away, that's why. We also, so talking about the app, there also is the opportunity to have our RRPs, so you guys can have the app as well. There's a little section for you, and that would show you where your leases are up to date, would show you what maintenance is up to, any invoices that are due to be paid so that you know what's coming out. We're just trialling at the moment. If anyone would like to have a go at that, let us know. Sarah will take your name and we'll put you on the list. It's pretty exciting. It's really good to be able to use this technology. One last thing, if I send you an email, please respond. Any questions? Great.
Thank you very much, Erin and Kylie. And I guess if you think about, there's been a huge amount of change that has occurred in residential property management over the past couple of years with the introduction of the new legislation, getting their heads around that. Also, we introduced a new trust accounting system, which I know there has been pain with that, but also progress. So it's been a huge couple of years, and I'd just like to acknowledge and thank the team for their incredible efforts. It has been a learning process for everyone, but hopefully you, our clients, are starting to see the benefits of that. And now it is my great pleasure to invite Rachel Trimble, who is after Gary, she is next in line as our longest serving team member, and she'll be celebrating her 22-year anniversary with us in August. So welcome, Rachel.
I was obviously very young when I started with Gary and Naz. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming out tonight. It's so great to see so many people here. We've already heard some really important information from both Steve and the ladies from the Res PM team. However, I thought I'd just share with you a little snapshot of the commercial department at Gary Nash & Co. We currently manage 301 tenancies, which is 201 properties, with a value of approximately $11,077,000 of rental income. These assets are a mixture of retail, office, industrial, warehouses, and we also have 3 storage facilities. Our average vacancy rate for the year just gone is 4.87%, which we tried to find some comparison, but the data isn't out there to be able to compare it to regional. So, but I think that we're going pretty good. We had a mixed trend of national brands wanting to set up in Wangaratta and local businesses wanting to either set up a brand new business venture or expand. These last 12 months have provided many positive results at our company, including 12% increase in new inquiries and a fantastic growth of 120% increase of properties leased. Over this next 12 months, along with our normal everyday tasks, our team will be focusing on the essential safety measures, reports and maintenance to ensure all properties are compliant with the Building Act 1993 and building maintenance under Building Regulations 2018. So that's a little snapshot, but I'd like to just pass it on to Mike.
I'll leave it. Thanks, Rach. And what Sarah forgot to mention was that Rachel is part of our exclusive 10-year club. So we've got a club for those employees that have been with us more than 10 years, and we go out once a year and have a meal. And it's pretty much means that we can't move them on. No, that's not quite right. Rach touched on the vacancy rate for commercial, and I was just thinking, we often hear there are so many vacant shops in Wangaratta. There are actually not that many vacant shops in Wangaratta. So from a leasing manager's perspective, it's really hard because we might get a requirement from a national tenant saying, can you please send us through examples of all your shops that are 150 square metres? Well, we may not have one. So whilst sometimes it takes a long time to let up properties, I think we're very fortunate with the the structure of our CBD being hemmed in by two rivers and a railway line, but it probably ensures that we've got quite a vibrant sort of central activities area, perhaps as opposed to somewhere like Shepparton or Wodonga, which is far more sprawling. That's not to say that we won't see a bit of vacancy this year. We are, witnessing stress coming through with a lot of small business and also some of the national brands, and what a lot of people would realise is that some of the national brands are actually the worst payers. Our mum and dad tenants are often the better payers. There's a fair bit of information in the booklet which I'm not going to go through, but one of the changes that I wanted to touch on was the exercise and option procedure, which slipped through in October 2020, which was around that wonderful time of COVID that we're all experiencing. So previously it was quite a simple document for exercising of option, which is pretty much that. So we'd have to serve that on a tenant, and they would tick a box and let us know whether or not they wanted to stay on. We would then perform a market rent review, and I should say that the tenant, once they exercised that option, they were locked in. Then we'd have the rent review negotiation. In my entire career, both as a lawyer and as a commercial property manager, I ever had only two that have gone to valuation, because we always try to negotiate with our clients, with our owners and the tenant for that good outcome. So the process was quite simple. Now, like with many things, it became a bit more complicated in October. So I did a law degree about 20 years ago, and so you could say that I've got at least half a brain. I shouldn't insult people here because there are two other lawyers in the room, so I'm sorry about that. But it's a hellishly complicated process, to the extent that from an internal perspective, we've got internal comments that run down the side of this document, bearing in mind that this is a document we've got to give to a tenant. So what we found is that our property managers now are having to explain a lot more to tenants, spend a lot more time to explain that they're going to get a complicated document, but the essence of that complicated document is quite simple. But all that's really happened, to cut a long story short, is that you have to perform your market rent review prior to the tenant exercising their option, or the tenant's got a right to cool off. And I think there's probably a moral element to that, which is fair enough, whereby the tenant should have the right to decide whether or not they want to continue on with a lease if the market rent review, which has been down here, is all of a sudden up there. But what it's meant is a lot more work, and we're trying to explain this to, just ordinary sort of hardworking people, which is a really, really heavy document and process. The other thing I wanted to touch on is a wonderful new tax that came into effect on the 1st of July. It's called the Commercial Industrial Property Tax, or CIPT. So the government have effectively abolished stamp duty on commercial and industrial properties, which is good news. However, there is stamp duty on the first transaction that occurs on a property after Monday, but any subsequent sales, there's no further stamp duty. So a particular property, whether it's our office at 23 Baker Street, if I was to sell that tomorrow, there'd be stamp duty on it, but if it was to sell any other time into the future, there's no further stamp duty. Now, this tax kicks in 10 years after the transaction. So the example I've put in the paper is that if you sell a commercial property, or you buy a commercial property on the 6th of February 2025, this new tax kicks in 2035, so in 10 years' time. And I was saying to Jacob Kane earlier today that we sat in on a State Revenue Office seminar a couple of weeks ago where they've got to explain what this new tax is, and the question was asked, well, when is this tax actually going to be payable in terms of the calendar year? And this fellow from the State Revenue Office said, look, possibly in the second half of the year, because land tax comes out in the first half of the year, so we might make it the second half of the year. But we haven't worked it out yet. We've got 10 years to do it. And I'll probably be retired by then. And so it gets you thinking that they can introduce this new legislation and not have it all noted out. But anyway, this CIPT is in addition to land tax. So it means that commercial property will be double taxed. So again, if nothing changes with the registration of your property, so if you own your property now and you never sell it, you don't cop this tax. It's only once it sells. And talking to a lawyer the other day, just in terms of disclosure, if you want to sell your commercial property, there'll be another search that'll have to be conducted. If the property is subject to this tax, that'll have to be something that'll have to be disclosed, because there will be a financial impact on people. There is some, people may have heard about people's ability to get a loan for the stamp duty, which is fantastic, except the example that they used in the paperwork, which is about 100 pages here if anyone wants to look at it, would equate to about an extra 40,000 in interest payments. So we can't see practically that anyone would take that up in a regional setting. I suppose the silver lining for regional investing is that this is still the 50% stamp duty on commercial and property, commercial and industrial property in regional Victoria, which is great. So at least that first transaction, you get a discount. There is a lot of information out there, so if anyone has any particular questions, just bail us up later, or we can send you out some specific information and links to these really straightforward information sheets. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce Jacob Kane, who's our next keynote speaker, and the bio's been put in our booklet here, which I'll just read out. Following a decade performing as a professional opera singer, Jacob began working full-time at Kane Real Estate, taking the helm as CEO in 2012. Jacob is a fully licensed estate agent, the current president of the REIV, a former director of realestateview.com.au, a former chairman of the Melbourne division of the REIV, and a former member of the Young Agents chapter of the REIV. Jacob has a passion for learning and development. He has a bachelor's degree with honours from Melbourne Uni, a master's of business administration from Monash, no loyalty there to the first one, Jake, a master in international relations from Harvard, graduating on the Dean's List with a near perfect 3.99 grade point average. In 2023, Jacob became a candidate for a PhD at ANU's National Security College, researching and writing a thesis creating a genealogical study of the term cyber attack. There are also a couple of other points here that Sarah missed out, which I thought you'd find interesting. He's also earned a graduate certificate in international security from Harvard and a public leadership credential from Harvard Kennedy School of Government. He has professional certificates from Harvard Business School, having completed the Authentic Leader, Negotiation Mastery, Management Essentials and Leadership Principles programs, as well as a certificate of specialisation in leadership and management. He fiercely advocates for higher education, operational and ethical standards for the real estate sector. Realising a shift in the perceptions of property professionals in Victoria is a driving aspiration and ambition. He's a very keen Richmond supporter. No, I actually made that up, he grabs for Carlton. And loves getting to the gym for a run. He has a massive pile of great unread books by his bed, which he's committed to reading this year. He's married to Danielle and has two incredible and hilarious children, a daughter Ivy and a son Oscar. So I'd love to welcome Jacob up to the stage.
If you can slot in, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well done. Thank you, Mike, indeed, for that very expansive introduction. I appreciate it greatly. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak here before you as well, incredibly as well. It's indeed an honour and a privilege. I'd like to extend a special thanks in particular to Gary Nash. Not only is he your generous host here today, but he is a predecessor of mine, an esteemed former president of the Real Estate Institute of Victoria. As you've heard, I am the current president of the Real Estate Institute of Victoria. I also run a residential real estate agency in inner Melbourne, and we deliver property management and sales services as well. And like so many of you here today, I am also a property investor. A property investor trying to understand, navigate, and work out just what it means to be a property investor here in Victoria in 2024. This presentation, I'll try and condense it down a bit just because I'm cognizant of the time. It's a presentation of two halves, to be perfectly honest. The first part's kind of doom and gloom. The second part is optimism. Let's have a look at what the green shoots are in terms of the Victorian property investment landscape. So we'll get straight into it. Obviously, it's no secret right now that our country is in the midst of perhaps the most acute housing supply and affordability crisis that we've ever faced. Cost of living pressures, low consumer confidence and general uncertainty are contributing to a broad sense of malaise, particularly here in Victoria. And these challenging conditions extend to those of us who are lucky enough to be property investors in this state. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, the landscape of property investors has shifted very significantly. Demand for housing has surged, driven by an increase in migration. Just last year, we saw 600,000 new arrivals to the country, the most that this country has ever had in one single year. And at the same time, we've got changing living preferences. We've seen the average household size in Australia reduce from 2.8 to 2.3 people. Now, that might not sound like much, but when you have 11 million households, it translates into millions of additional households, homes, apartments, units, townhouses and houses that we need in order to meet that changing demographic and changing mix of people. A rapid and unanticipated rise in interest rates has bucked historical trends and led to a significant increase in property prices and subsequently rents. That's put pressure on mortgage holders, prospective purchasers and renters alike. The role of property investors has expanded beyond traditional expectations. As you've heard from your expert property managers here at Garry Nash & Co, both on the residential and commercial side, wholesale changes to the Residential Tenancies Act for 2020 and 2022 have introduced new compliance requirements that materially altered the renters' and owners' rights and obligations, and they've changed the processes for resolving disputes as well. All of that means that the job of your property managers, whether commercial or residential, and your job as an owner of an investment property has become significantly more complex. Add to that additional taxes, which we've just heard about there in terms of the CIPT. I'm going to try and call it SIPP. That's less of a mouthful, right? SIPP. The SIPP, but we've also had an increase to land tax on the residential side of things, an absentee owner surcharge. All of these taxes have added financial pressures to property investors, and in some cases that's forced a lot of property investors to exit the market. Fluctuations in market conditions driven by economic uncertainty, changing consumer behaviour, and obviously the unfortunate and terrible geopolitical events that are playing out across the world at the moment have made it essential for investors to stay informed and adaptable at all times. That concept of set and forget is not really practicable in 2024. Expectations from stakeholders have increased, but particularly renters. They've ramped up massively in the recent years, with tenants now demanding higher standards of living as they contemplate longer term leases or even being lifelong renters. And the same can be said for commercial renters. Sustainability in particular is going to be a focus. If it's not something you've experienced as a commercial landlord yet, look out, it's coming down the pipeline. These demands have, as I said, recently focused on energy and efficiency and safety. And what we're seeing in the residential space with regards to minimum standards, which we can talk about a little bit later on, is going to be an increase to the requirements there for energy efficiency, heating, cooling, and some of the guys have already touched on that as well, so I'll skip through that. Where are we at here? I haven't done well with the slides, have I?
You're meant to look at me.
That's right. Okay, let's go back a couple. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, let's go there. All right, so sentiment. In the property sector, while positive sentiment can be incredibly valuable, negative sentiment can be incredibly dangerous. At the moment, many investors are exiting the rental investment market driven solely by terrible sentiment, not the economic realities of their investment portfolio. These owners, they're sick and tired of new laws, of new taxes, new regulations, and also feeling like a punching bag for the media and the government. There are a significant number of properties that have come onto the market, particularly the residential market, and I'm talking about the sales market there over the past 12 months, which are investor properties that were profitable and that had realised and continue to realise capital growth. But the poor sentiment in the property investment landscape has guided them towards a decision to sell that property. That subsequent flood of properties onto the market all at once has put downward pressure on achievable prices for sale and as suppliers exceeded demand. This is a clear case of poor sentiment actually driving real-world negative impacts. An unarguable truth of this human condition that we all endure is that few people actually like to admit that they can't afford something. Over the past 2.5 years, many property investors have had to face the unfortunate reality that they can no longer afford to keep their investment property. Mortgage stress is overwhelmingly the root cause of rental providers or property investors exiting the market. That said, as I've touched on before, the changes to land tax that were introduced earlier this year have for some been the straw that's broken the camel's back. The REIV is in near constant contact with the government, advocating, dare I say, pleading with the government to change these settings to help keep those property investors that are teetering on the edge in the rental system. We need to keep them in there to ensure the overall health of the property ecosystem here in Victoria. Now, I'm sure this doesn't apply to anyone in this room. Generally, astute investors tend to come to events like this, but you'd be astounded to know how many property investors don't really pay that much attention to the basic performance of their investment, and they're entirely unaware of just how their property is performing in the current marketplace or how it's performed over the long term. Again, I say this that I'm sure it doesn't apply to any of you, but hypothetically, if you weren't someone who, at the bare minimum, reviewed your property's income and expenditure reports, I highly recommend that before you even consider selling that property, grab that information, have a look at it and see where you stand in the current marketplace. Now, as I said at the outset, I know I've just spent 5 minutes essentially talking about poor sentiment, and there's no escaping the negative conversations about property investment here in Victoria. This is a narrative that has been turbocharged by the media and taken up by various stakeholders. It has unfortunately seeped into the thinking of too many Victorians. But I'd implore you to fight against this trend. We mustn't buy into that narrative. Now, to try and avoid getting caught up in that negativity myself, I've adopted a mindset that I like to call informed positivity. This approach is grounded in real insights and an optimism about the Victorian property landscape. Let's take a quick look at some real insights briefly to help rebut some of this negative perception. I might go to, the previous slide. Just have a look at these numbers here, right? So new investor loans are higher today than they were before the pandemic. Yes, the investor loans reached a peak in May of 2022, but that peak was basically when borrowing money was free and the then governor of the RBA said that we weren't going to have a rent increase until 2024, and I think we all know how that played out. Even in June 2023, if you look up there at that graph, when we were through the brunt of the recent interest rate rises, I say recent, I'm hoping recent, and that will be the end of it, but investor loans as a proportion of total new loans almost exceeded that May 2022 peak. So what that tells us is that investors are buying investment properties at a greater rate today than before the pandemic. that can help us begin to rewrite or correct the narrative that property investors are fleeing the market in droves. As we saw in the previous slide, the peak for investor loans was in February 2022. There were about 4,602 of them. Why so many? As I said before, free money. But we also had high savings at the time, and people were not, they were still not travelling internationally at that point. So there were a lot of people that thought, can't go to Europe this year, maybe I'll buy a beach house instead, which, as I'm saying it, sounds pretty crazy, but it's good for some people. Now you can see from this table that the average investor loan size has come down significantly in the 2 years between Feb 22 and Feb 24. The immediate assumption that one could take from this is that property prices have dropped very significantly, around 8%. That's what that data could suggest, but we actually know that that isn't the case. What the table really tells us is that investors are buying less expensive properties, not beach houses, but apartments and units and townhouses. Investors have returned to buying strategically for value and yield. As an example, REIV data shows the median prices for units in areas like Wallan and Dandenong, for instance, have seen very significant growth. Why? They're comparatively more affordable and deliver higher rental yields. You get more bang for your buck, basically. As margins have been squeezed in inner Melbourne suburbs and the core of the regional centres, they've pushed investors into new markets in the outer suburbs, or in some instances, smaller neighbouring towns, where despite lower prices, rental demand is still incredibly strong. Let's push forward. Yes, median prices, right. So looking at the 10-year growth in median prices, again, silver lining is what we're doing right here, or the positive story. We can see the capital value improvements that houses in particular have enjoyed, delivering over the 10-year period improvements of around 60% for inner Melbourne houses and more than 50% for houses across all of Melbourne. Now, if you push forward to the next slide, we'll see that regional house prices have basically doubled over the last 10 years, while unit prices have realised around 60% growth in value. So when you factor these kind of numbers into your consideration, rather than looking at the immediate, if you see what you've enjoyed over the previous 10 years and look forward and aspire or hope that you can realise the same kind of growth, or even a fraction of that growth, is still very, very good in terms of being a property investor. More weekly rents, yes. So rents across all categories have continued to rise over the past decade, only losing ground briefly during the pandemic and then recovering at an incredible pace since they bottomed out in around 2022. And if we push forward too, and Wangaratta rents, we heard from your residential property managers earlier on, right? Was it 95% used to be affordable within the past 2 years, and now you're at 25%. That's a brutal statistic if you're a renter, less so if you're a property investor. Now, obviously, we need to find the balance there where investors can enjoy the benefits of strong rental yields on their properties whilst still having sufficient affordable homes for renters to have. But that is the kind of turnaround that we've seen in terms of rental yields. Let's push forward onto another one. Great. In this table, the top slide you can see there shows increases in rental returns. The table below shows performance over a similar period for Vanguard's ASX index fund. Now, whilst the two tables aren't directly comparable in their measurements, they do demonstrate the strength of returns and opportunity that property investment offers in the current climate, again, over the long run. Earlier this week, I saw a report from Alan Kohler, the economist, and he reinforced this same message that demonstrates that the property market once again outperformed the ASX over the financial year 23-24. And moving on, thank you so much. But really, if you want to make the argument to remain a property investor or become a Victorian property investor, you can't really get better than this table. In the simplest terms, rental yields today are higher than before the pandemic and as high as they've ever been. So, changing the conversation around property investment, ultimately, it starts with us. As an industry, as investors, as participants in this Victorian property landscape, we've got to avoid buying into the negative sentiment, because when we pile on, as I pointed out earlier on, it can actually translate into worse outcomes for us, worse outcomes for anyone that has an interest in Victorian property. We have to talk positively about being a property investor in Victoria. We need to remember that expression, safe as houses, exists for a reason, because it's the best type of investment. Commercial and residential property is safe as it comes. Here are a couple of additional, actually let's skip through these because I'm going like terribly for time. Let's go through this. All right, let's go in here, Q&A. So my talk was supposed to cover off on legislation, social and housing affordability, taxation, what's coming down the pipeline. Thought rather than go through that, because you've got a fantastic document sitting there on your table that outlines some of the taxation changes and regulations that are being proposed or that have come into place over the past couple of years. We can have a conversation about it. You can ask questions that might be concerning you about what's going to be happening in the landscape. Yes, all right, I'm done there. That's my talking. Over to you guys. Any questions? No? Minimum standards? You want to talk about the new minimum standards that are being proposed? They're in the booklet there. Have a look at them. That's a fantastic document, right? You should. I'm going to steal it, Gary. Thank you very much. Thanks, Ben. As I touched on earlier on, sustainability is going to be a focus for everyone over the coming years, right? It's a existential question that governments and businesses and us as individuals are going to need to face and come to terms with what's required to meet the challenges sitting before us. Now, the Victorian government has just proposed some additions to the minimum standards. They're all energy efficiency focused. Now, the cynic in me, that they're being sold as improve the rental experience, right? Which I fully endorse. We as an institute, as a membership, as professionals working in the property space, one of our core aspirations should be to provide Victorian renters with the best possible rental experience, the best rental experience of anywhere in the world. Why? Because if it's good for them, it's good for you, and it's good for us, right? This is a symbiotic relationship between property investor and the renter, the person occupying that premise, whether commercial or residential. But the truth of the matter is these changes that the government has proposed are for one reason only, and that is to try and meet their 2030, 2035, 2040 and 2050 emissions reductions targets without transitioning the built environment, the already established built environment. They will not reach those targets. Now, from an REIB perspective, when we're advocating in the room with the ministers, this is actually a good thing, because we know that we can say to them, and I've been saying to them this in the past couple of weeks, help us help you, right? Because we have the power to actually help them, because we have, as property management professionals, we have the capacity to help owners of investment properties make the decisions that are going to help them get to their targets, right? They're good outcomes for you too. I should state this, that the data already is showing that properties with a higher energy efficiency, whether commercial or residential, sell at double-digit increases on those that are less efficient. They rent at higher rates, particularly in commercial. Companies are going to demand this of you, that you have the highest energy efficiency rating in there, that you have sustainability credentials within that building, whatever that looks like, whether that's insulation, whether that's the orientation of the building, whether that's double glazing, whether that's solar panels. There's a building that's being constructed in Melbourne right now on Burke Street. It's the first of its type in the world. It has an entire solar scheme. It runs on a vegetable oil, diesel and solar. That's it. Zero emissions, zero embedded carbon in the building. That is going to be the standard in 10 years, right? So we need to be thinking about that now. Anyway, I'm going on. Ask a question. Yes.
So how do you deal with two scenarios? One, you own Victorian House. I mean, Victorian period.
Yep.
Victoria. Or secondly, you own a unit in a block of, say, 30 units, multi-storey, and you have a OC who doesn't spend any money.
Fantastic questions, and I think Erin might have touched on this. I'm not sure. I'm not here to criticise the government, right? We've got firm strategic direction to work with the government, right? To realise their ambitions. These proposals in terms of the changes have not been thought through. And the Real Estate Institute of Victoria has made a submission along these lines saying, if you roll it out like this, it will not be effective, right? Because they've got lots of exemptions. So to a Victorian home, right, there are exemptions for if it's cost prohibitive. They haven't defined what cost prohibitive is, right? So if you're sitting there going, it's going to cost me $25,000 to adjust the ceiling insulation and put in new cooling, cost prohibitive, right? That's too expensive, you can't do that. So what do? You don't do it, because they've got exemptions there. So really it's kind of counterproductive, because as long as you can use those exemptions, they need to have been much more strategic in terms of the rollout. The same applies in that owners corporation situation. So we've said this to them, like, what are you going to do with owners corporations? Because there are hundreds of thousands of apartments that need some upgrades, right? Again, for them to realise these ambitions, and that they need to work with owners corporations, and they haven't had conversations with owners corporations about this yet. I'm confident that there will be, if not a longer timeline for implementation of these new minimum standards, that the exemptions will be broad enough that if you can't afford it, if it's not manageable, you won't have to do it, not in the short term as well. So, which to my earlier point is, it's counterproductive. If they want to hit these targets, they need to. It's the same thing they've done with the housing statement. It wasn't thought through. They just went, let's do this, and this, and now they're trying to work out how to actually execute these things. To my mind, it should come the other way around. Did that answer your question? Sort of. Yeah.
So upgrading a flat to 7 floors up.
Yep.
No balcony. How do you manage?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's to my the conversation we've just had in terms of exemptions. You, in all likelihood, you'll be exempt from needing to adjust that. Yeah. Until they change, right, laws, which may have to, like they're going to have to. You know, things like gas, it's going to be sunset, right? In 10 years, gas will not be a thing, right? Maybe longer, 15 years. That's going to happen. There's no avoiding it. The kind of regulations that are coming down the pipeline, they're going to have to get more and more significant, right? So as of May 1st, the NATHERS, the NATHERS, increased in Victoria to set a 7-star rating. So if you're building a new property, you need a 7-star energy efficiency rating, a residential property, right? That's probably going to come into effect. They're going to have to retro fit legislation to tackle these things, and there's going to be, my great fear is that there's going to be massive costs to owners corporations where they go, like a cladding situation where they go, it has to be done within 24 months. It's going to cost the owners $250,000 to make adjustments, etc., to be able to provide, you know, condensers or whatever on the roof or subterranean, and owners are just going to have to cop it. And what's going to happen then? An exodus of property investors who can't afford to meet those costs. But that's going to happen. Not today, probably not in the next few years, but certainly within 10, I would say. I tried to paint, I wanted to paint a rosier picture. It's true though, look, going back to the stats, right, the figures still demonstrate that this is, in this country, property is still the best investment, right? It's the safest, it's the most bankable, it gives you returns. Things from both a commercial and residential perspective will continue to improve throughout 25-26. If you can, stick fast. I'm going to stop talking. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks very much, Jacob, and it's always good to finish on a positive note, and that bricks and mortar are the way to go in the future, so we'll work our way through that. So thank you very much, Jacob, for coming up from Melbourne to impart your knowledge, and it's really important that that knowledge that we're getting there is right from its current as we speak today. And that's the thing that we try and keep up with from our perspective, with that, I suppose, immediate information so that we can pass it on to you. Okay, so we're now crossing across to our fellow director in Cameron, who to give us a bit of a summary on where the rural city of Wangaratta is up to from a residential perspective.
Okay, thank you very much, and well done, Jacob. That was entertaining and really well presented, the information you had there. I got all that out of it, so thanks. And thanks again for coming all the way from down sunny Melbourne. Tonight's been a lot about property management, which I know nothing about. So this will just be a quick snapshot of what's happening in the residential sales department, and I'd just like to acknowledge some of our sales team that are here tonight. We've got 5 core residential team members, mixing from age group of about 19 to 20 years of age through to more mature aged. I won't tell you how old Marty is. Who's also our #1 salesperson at the moment, so well done. Wasn't sure how to broach this tonight, so I thought, well, how does my day end up mostly? And it ends up in the supermarket. And there would be very few people in this room that I don't bump into at some stage in the supermarket. I don't admit to knowing all of your names, but certainly in the suit we tend to stand out. So whether it be in the fruit and veg or the bread aisle or sometimes the chocky aisle or the bottle shop, a lot of the questions are the same, and I really enjoy having those questions and chatting about it. And probably the #1 question I get asked at the moment is, so Cam, what's the market doing? And obviously depending on where you come from and what market you operate in, that's really different. But here, very locally in Wangaratta, in a word, good. The market's quite good. We're seeing really good balance of people wanting to sell for various reasons. A good number of buyers are out there. Vendors, if they get their price reasonably accurate and the property's well presented, well maintained, they will get good interest. We don't have the same amount of buyers that we did have back in 2022, that COVID, sort of coming to that COVID market. Absolutely, those days are gone, but it is still very good. There are markets that I acknowledge that aren't enjoying as strong the details and results that we are. Sarah's jumped ahead of me here. I'll come back to that graph in a moment. So in a nutshell, things are tracking really well. There's no doubt the market's come back a little bit, and I think that's supply and demand driven more so. And this graph, do we have a pointer, Sarah? I think we
You
did.
can use the mouse.
Oh, that's going to be hard for me. No, I don't need to. So 2022. Don't worry about the colours for now. Don't worry about the colours for now. This is coming out of peak 2020. This is coming out of peak 2022, and it was May. In fact, there was 108 residential, that's units and houses. 109 properties available coming out of the peak. This goes back to 2010. As you can see, month on month, these are monthly columns, we rose to this current, the hard right is June, the month prior, being May of course, was 200 and it was a lot. It was about 267 residential properties available, dropped slightly in July. So you can see, as we've come out of COVID, more supply equals more competition for buyers. They can be a little bit pointier with their offers. Vendors aren't spoilt for choice as much. The one thing to remember is most of us have short memories. We only remember the recent aggressive market where things were tracking along almost out of control. A lot of people thought that real estate agents thought that was fantastic. Financially, absolutely, it was very profitable, but it wasn't sustainable and it wasn't enjoyable. Vendors were stressed, they were selling and not knowing if they were going to be able to purchase. Buyers didn't enjoy particularly the competition with other buyers. But what we can see, so I'm walking around a lot, is that it is almost back to where it always was. Certainly maybe not back into the early teens, but even then there's peaks that were very similar. So for those of us both in the industry and who are consumers of real estate, what we always knew to be the market here in Wangaratta is really where it's probably at the moment. And our guess is for the short term, at least, it's probably going to stay the same. I'm not game enough to crystal ball what's going to happen in the future in interest rates. That's well above my pay grade. But for now, things are tracking along pretty well and we've got a lot to be confident about. One of the questions I get asked in the supermarket is where are all these people coming from that are buying property in Wangaratta? And a lot of our guys do some stats on that. Over the last 12 months, although I don't have locations where they've come from, a bit over 20% of all of the residential properties we sold were to new residents, people coming to Wangaratta, and they vary dramatically. It could be they're following family, following their children, possibly getting away from family. Employment is a big one. The number one employer or health sector is the health sector here in Wangaratta, which represents about 15.5% of all employment. A lot of people coming here for manufacturing jobs as well. Just under 20%, so nearly 18% of all of our properties were sold to first home buyers, which a lot of people are a bit surprised by that given the interest rates, but first home buyers are still out there. Existing residents, so people who live here, they might be upsizing, downsizing, still represent the biggest pool of buyers that we deal with, and that's just a touch over 50%. And investors, as you all are, whether it be residential or commercial, this stat is residential based, is 28% of all the properties we sold in the last 12 months were to investors. A little down on the prior 12 months, according to our office, that was at 34%. So still, to support Jacob's stat earlier, still plenty of activity happening from the property investor segment. There's also the schools. So we've got 3 really well-known popular secondary schools, several high-quality primary schools. There's a TAFE and a lot of further education. So that's keeping people interested in sticking around Wangaratta or coming to our lovely town. What's going to happen for the rest of this year? As I mentioned, I think we can expect to stay the status quo. Fairly stable. There is certainly some pain out there that we're seeing, not as much as maybe people anticipate. We're not selling homes every day for people who literally can't afford them, but certainly people are mindful of it. A lot of people are asking our advice for updated market appraisals to consider their options. So that's something that we're doing a lot more. We've seen certainly an increase in the number of people contacting our team to ask for current market updates. But that's not necessarily equaling more sales at the moment. Crystal ball, no, I said I wasn't going to go there. I think it's the lifestyle of Wangaratta is what's keeping things moving nicely. So if you own property here and you can hang on to it, we're confident that in the next few years things will continue to grow. There's plenty of reasons to be here. That's all I really had to say today. Is there any questions about the residential market that I can answer? No? Okay. Well, I'm hanging around, so if I do see you in the supermarket, please come and say hello.
Thank you. I've got the job to wrap up, so I'd firstly like to thank Steve and Jake for speaking tonight. I think we've all got some wonderful information from them. Thank you, Jake, particularly for coming up from Melbourne, and Steve from Wangaratta. Both of you have got extremely busy day jobs, and we appreciate you taking the time to come and speak with us all tonight. We do have a little something for you, so you'd like to come up, please. to thank you all for coming as well, and thank you for your business, but probably more importantly, thank you for your trust in us. And it's wonderful to see some of the faces here of our clients, and some of whom who also travelled distance tonight to be here. So it was really pleasing to hear Jake and both Gary as well say, after all this, is investment in real estate worth it? Well, absolutely. You can touch it, it's tangible. Unlike what my 17-year-old son says to me about what our crypto investment's doing, which isn't very much. That was a good school project, Sarah, wasn't it? And in our own particular market, so in 2019, the median house price in Wangaratta was $333,500, and this month it's $519. So that's a 65% increase in our market, Jacob, which was consistent with what you're saying. And then from a commercial investment point of view, in 2019, we were probably selling properties with 7 to 8% yields. We're seeing that that's now sort of in that 6 to 7 bracket, which is really quite strong. Other investments can just disappear and evaporate, whereas real estate can't burn, Steve. So we look forward to continuing to help you. I'd just like to finish off with a little plug for our community fund. We were going to officially launch this at our 40-year anniversary celebration a few years ago, which didn't occur. So it's now been 3 years since our community fund's been in operation, and we're really blown away to see that it's nearly $250,000 has been donated to our fund. We've been able to support 50 local organisations over that period of time, with a touch over 100,000 paid out, with a current balance of nearly 130,000. So we really want to set up, I suppose, a legacy and build on what Gary and Marion started 40 plus years ago with their giving. We want to set something up that's going to last beyond Gary and Marion, which the way Gary's going probably is another 50 years. Beyond Cam and my ownership and the next subsequent generations of ownership. We sort of feel as good corporate citizens, it's our duty to contribute to our community. It provides us with so much, and it provides our team and our clients with so much. It also enables us to ensure that the funds that we receive get directly to that grassroots and directly to those organisations and their volunteers, which need it. And they need it so much more. And with government reducing so many things, it's really up to us to support our community. And a final plug, which there are a couple of accountants in here, I see that if you are selling property and you do have some capital gains tax, have a chat to your accountant as to whether or not you can divert some of that capital gains tax to a DGR status charity. So once again, thank you for coming. We'll all be around for a little while if you want to bail us up, and thank you. That's it. Did you, Rachel, enjoy your public speaking? Would you like to?
Live